All right, so today what I wanted to do for the live session is get into what you read for yesterday and kind of walk through that first kind of main section of the book in reference to two things. In reference to how LaRose sets up her thesis and supporting her thesis, and then also in reference to your book report assignment. As basically, instead of trying to provide you summaries of chapters, and what I try to do is talk about the chapters in reference to the book report. So kind of keep that in mind as you go through the lectures and as you're reading the book. So the last lecture we talked about kind of the focus going into the research. LaRose and her team of researchers were looking at two variables, the variable class and the variable of race, and how those two things shaped parenting styles and how those parenting styles can contribute to class reproduction. So basically, the reproduction of inequality when the kind of rich stay rich, and those in the middle stay in the middle, and those who are kind of the lower end of things tend to stay there. So again, class mobility going upward or downward is possible, but it's more the exception. 7 out of 10 people will kind of stay within their class. So, as a sociologist, why is this? And so, if you can have money passed down to you, that's one obvious way to reproduce your class position. If you lack money being passed down to you, again, that contributes to you staying within a class perhaps. But, LaRose interested more in visible mechanisms, how different parenting styles can contribute to, the middle class kids staying in the middle class or the working class kids staying in the working class. So she looked at race and class together, but overall, what she found early on in the research was that of the two variables, class weighs more in terms of its influence on parenting styles. And this relates to the first part of your paper. So you have to kind of choose either race or class. For LaRose, which one was more influential? She found it was social class, and then you have to kind of explain that. And so I think the best way to kind of see it as evident is by looking at when you have the same race in terms of two families, but they come from different class backgrounds, what you see are different parenting styles. So in other words, they're both white families or they're both African American families, but if they come from different classes, they parent in different ways. Likewise, if you can take two families from different racial categories, so you can look at one African American in the book and compare it to another African, or compared to a white family in the book. And if they come from the same class background, then the parenting will be similar. So again, race is different. So if race mattered more, then you see different parenting. But because they have the same class background, the race is more insignificant. They start to parent in the same ways, whether it be that NG parenting style associated with the working class or the CC parenting style associated with the middle and upper classes. So that's kind of the main argument that she puts forth throughout the book. And so whenever you have an article or a book, there's always that main idea and the thesis, and the rest of the reading, whether it be the article you're reading or the book that you're reading, and the rest of it is there to kind of support the idea. So here's my thesis, and here's how I support it. And she supports it by looking at the daily life organization of kids. So how a parent or how parents organize a kid's life on a daily basis. And then she gets into language use within the family and how families interact with their kids' institutions. So those are the three main ways that she's supporting her thesis. But also those are the three main connections that will be in the second part of your paper. So the first part of your paper ties into the thesis and kind of why the thesis is the way it is. And then the second part of the paper asks you to look at the three main connections between social class and parenting styles. And so those three connections are 1, 2, and 3. And then also talk about kind of why class matters. So I'm going to kind of get into the slides here, specifically in reference to all those things, because that's basically what we're looking at for your paper. And so, one thing to always be mindful is, the different makeup of each chapter. So the makeup is going to be twofold. You want to know the class background of the kid and their family, because that class background tells us if it's going to be the CC parenting style or the NG parenting style. So, looking at Garrett being a middle class kid, then we should automatically think of the CC parenting style. That's what we're going to be reading about. On the other hand, when looking at Katie and Tyreek coming from lower class backgrounds, what should come to mind is that NG parenting style. And that's what we're going to be seeing within those chapters. In addition, we need to recognize not only the class, but the race of the kid and the race of the family. So here you start to see that chapters 4 and 5, the two kids come from different racial categories, but because they come from similar class backgrounds, the parenting, it tends to overlap. It tends to be similar. And, unlike that is when you look at both Katie and Garrett. Garrett and Katie are both white, but they are parented differently, and the different parenting styles comes from different class backgrounds. When looking at Katie from a poorer background and Garrett from a more upper middle class background. So, just kind of recognizing who the kids are in terms of race and class helps you understand the overall kind of argument being put forth in the book. And so here's what I do in the next two lectures as well. I basically take each section of the book, the three main connections between class and parenting style, and I break them down in reference to usually 4, sometimes 5 different characteristics that make up that type of parenting. So here we're looking at the daily life characteristics. So the different characteristics that make up the daily life organization of the kid. So, let me kind of stop that there. Any questions you guys have before I move forward? You guys good? Okay. Well, again, just feel free to type in something or just shout out if you have any thoughts. So, looking at the characteristic of schedule, basically we're looking at kind of on a daily to day basis. Is the kid's schedule full? Is he or she enrolled in a lot of formal activities, whether it be sports, kind of musical activities, different kind of educational pursuits? Are you in art classes? So again, these are these formal activities that would kind of fill up your schedule. On the other hand, the open schedule signifies that you may be enrolled in kind of one activity or another, but for the most part, you have an open schedule. Not too many things going on, formally speaking, on a day-to-day basis. You may have your school, you may have some activity, after school, but your schedule isn't full to the brim like you see with other kids. And so you start to kind of say, one parenting style has the more open schedule for the kid, and the other parenting style, it's a more structured schedule. And you divide those up by saying it's the CC kids that have these full schedules. So, at the beginning of the book, she gets into, I believe it's Garrett's schedule. It's like 7 days a week, multiple things going on per day. So it's a very structured, very full schedule compared to the NG kids. They may have things going on, but it's not, to the degree as Garrett and other CC kids. So that's why we can say that one's more open compared to one's more structured. If they were both the same, then you couldn't separate the parenting styles. But because you do see a difference, you can distinguish the NG style from the CC style. And the same thing we get into with playtime. Playtime is more formalized, refined with the CC kids. And we'll get into that in a second. And then in comparison, it's more informal for the NG kids. And by formalized, basically, there's always somebody telling you kind of what to do and how to do it. What to do, what not to do, when to start, when to stop. And typically, that formalization of the playtime is done by the coach. It's done by the instructor. And so there's always kind of an authority figure present that's kind of telling the kids what to do and how to do it. The informal playtime with the NG kids is basically the kids themselves making it up for themselves. They don't have that authority figure telling them kind of what to do, what not to do. So they kind of figure it out on their own, for themselves. So it's more kind of go with the flow, very informal compared to the CC kids, where it's very formalized according to kind of a planned, session, whether it be again, something like ROTC, something like football or softball, or band practice. And so, kind of staying on that theme, when you're involved in those activities such as ROTC, softball, band practice, typically you share the same space with adults. So we say you're in the same spheres because there's always, a team of coaches. There's always a team of leaders that provide that authority figure, adult presence. And on the other hand, with the NG kids, with their playtime being more open, more informal, they typically don't have that coach, instructor, authority figure there telling them what to do. So there we say it's more separate spheres. They're more often with their peers, with siblings around the same age, or sometimes they're alone. And so we say they're kind of separated from adults. And then overall, the last one we'll get into family ties. So again, what you find through one parenting style, there's stronger bonds, stronger cohesion among family members, both kind of close and more extended family members compared to the other. And she finds that the NG families typically have stronger ties compared to the CC families in comparison to the NG families. The CC families typically have weaker ties. So again, that's kind of step one, kind of recognizing how within those connections, daily life organization right here for the next one's language use and how the families interact with their kids' institutions, you can break down kind of that connection by looking at how things are different in one parenting style or the other. So any questions so far? So, now what you need to do is kind of recognize that second part in the middle part of your book report assignment. I ask you to, come up with examples of those connections. So all of these would be kind of ways you could do that. But then also I talk about, why does class matter? Why is class creating these differences? What we see in one category or what we see in another. Because these things, according to Leroux, don't happen, by magic. They don't happen by chance. Rather, there are class-based resources that promote, the structured or the open schedules for the kids. And so we need to identify those class-based resources and how they shape the CC style or how they shape the NG style. And so that's what I do in this kind of last slide. And again, I approach, each section of the book in the same way. I'll talk about the characteristics, how they're different for the different parenting styles, and then we'll get into the role of class. So, why does class matter? And so when we look at class, we need to look at different resources that are associated with class position. In other words, we can think of money. We can think of time as two different resources. Typically, families from upper class backgrounds have more resources when it comes to time, more time on their hands because they have more flexible schedules at work. Perhaps they have a partner that stays at home with the kid. So, that partner can, really make sure the kid's everywhere that, she needs to be. Compared to more kind of working lower class families, they don't have as much free time on their hands. Their work schedules are not as flexible when it comes to comparing them to the middle and upper class workers. And typically they're working longer hours, more abnormal work hours. And also when they're a single parent, you don't have that person kind of helping you out. Or when you have a two-parent working class family, and typically, both parents are working. So you don't have as much free time on your hands to perhaps do what you want to do as a parent. So money is easy to understand, if you have the finances to pay for something or not. You can parent in one way or you can't. But time's another resource that typically we don't think about, but it really does matter when it comes to parenting. And it's a resource like money that's connected to one's class position. So, all these things I list, lifestyle, what's normal for you, as a parent, what's normal for you in terms of how other people are parenting around you, adult experience, basically, what you experience as an adult on a day-to-day basis and how that can influence kind of what you do and how you do it. So, all these things kind of tie into class-based resources, and these are the items that promote kind of one way of parenting or the other. So just kind of as an example, we can look at the kid having a very full schedule or an open schedule. What comes to mind would be money right away, because money is a factor in terms of, all these activities typically come with a fee, come with a cost, whether it be you have to rent an outfit, you have to buy an outfit, you have to buy an instrument. So you have to pay a fee to play in the league. So, all these things come with cost, and the cost will add up. And there are transportation costs as well when it comes to getting kids to and from all the activities. And so, when money is not an issue, you can enroll your kid in all these activities. You can over enroll your kid sometimes in all these activities because the fees and the cost mean nothing to you because you can afford them. On the other hand, if you come from more of the working or lower class background, then money is an issue. So maybe your kid wants to do all these things at once, but you ask him or her to settle on one thing. So you can play sports, but you can only pick one because we can't afford all the costs that come with you playing 3 or 4 sports. Or you can play, you can be in the band, or you can take art classes, but you have to choose one because at this time we can't afford you doing both. So that's how money, you can see, would start to create these patterns of the NG kids having more open schedules and the CC kids having more structured schedules. But again, there are other factors that tie into this, such as that lifestyle. If you live on a block, if you live on a street where all the other parents are enrolling their kids in 5 different activities a week, then that becomes normal to you. You kind of expect that, okay, if that's the way people are parenting, I should be parenting in a similar way. You may not even agree with it. You may think that's a little bit much. But again, as a parent, the last thing you want to do is put your kid at a disadvantage. All these other kids are getting these skills and getting all these experiences from these activities. I don't want my kid to fall behind. So I'll enroll him in all these activities as well. Again, you look at the NG parents where they look on their streets, they look on their blocks. Again, the kids are not enrolled in 10 things a week. So you don't even kind of think about over enrolling your kid in these activities because nobody around you is doing it. So yeah, maybe you do lack the money, but it doesn't seem normal to you because the people the people around you aren't doing that as well. So again, class-based resources can be financial, but sometimes they're more symbolic when it comes to what is normal, what is not. Or resources such as time. Again, you need a lot of time on your hands to get the kids to all the activities. If you lack that time, even if you could afford the activities, you're not going to have your kid doing multiple things per day because you don't know how to get your kid to and from those activities. So, basically that's what we're going to do, kind of connect all the class-based resources to, all these different parenting strategies. And here it is pretty simple, this first chapter, where you can say if the kid's in a lot of activities, then those activities are going to be very formalized. There's always going to be an instructor telling you what to do, how to do it. When you're in those activities, typically you're around the adult presence, you're in that same space. Then also you can continue it to look at family ties and say, when you're, always doing these activities, and then that leaves little time for you to spend with your own family, with extended family members. And then we can look at another reason class would tie into family ties. If you can afford babysitters, if you can afford nannies, and then you don't have to rely on your family members to help you look after your kid. But if you can't afford, the nannies, if you can't afford the babysitters, who typically do you reach out to when you need somebody to pick up the kid from school or to drop the kid off out of practice or to simply to babysit, to look over the kids when you're not there? Typically you reach out to family members. a sibling, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, somebody who's around that can help you pick up the slack when the slack needs to be picked up. So, that's how you can look at these different class-based resources are shaping these different parenting styles. So I'll leave that there. Any questions so far? And so, I try to kind of break everything down here. And one thing I'll say before I get into the last part of the thesis, the thesis again being how all this contributes to the kids having different life chances. Because the CC kids have more life chances, they're more likely to be part of the middle and upper classes. The NG kids having fewer life chances, more likely to stay within the working and lower classes. But so a lot of the times, this book, it's interesting for a lot of students because not only can you kind of recognize what's going on, but you start to reflect upon it a little bit. Did I fit in one parenting style, or did I fit in the other? And sometimes there's that perfect fit. Oh, that's me, or that's somebody I know. But often, we're kind of a little bit in the gray area where, yeah, that's more like me, but I did that as well. And so Laurel's not trying to say that's always going to be black and white. That's 100% or 0%. What she says is there is a significant difference. And these significant differences we see, contribute to, one style being one way and the other being another way. So keep that in mind as you're reading as well. So here, get into that class reproduction part. Not only are the kids parented differently, but the kids acquire different skills as a result. So, for example, if you're participating in a lot of activities that are formalized, such as, ROTC, such as softball, what you start to learn is how to juggle these activities and how to manage your time wisely. Because, you're doing this, every morning, you have to balance that out with what you're doing later. So you need to find time to juggle all these things at once. So kind of by default, when you're enrolled in a lot of activities, you acquire a lot of organization skills. On the other hand, when you're not involved in a lot of these activities, you don't have to juggle a lot of things, so you don't acquire those organization skills. But what you do get are creativity skills. So when you don't have somebody telling you what to do and how to do it, you have to figure it out on your own. And when you kind of make it up, what you're doing is you're being creative. And so both skills are positive skills. You like your kid to be creative. You would like your kid to be organized. But here's where it goes down to the thesis. LaRoe argues that in institutions such as schools and work, those institutions specifically are important because they kind of put you in a later class position. If you do really well at school, if you do really well at work, typically you're going to be part of the middle or the upper class. On the other hand, if you tend to just get by, or if you don't do well in school or at work, typically you're going to stay within the working and lower classes. So there's where we start to get into the class reproduction. And the idea is, as a result of the CC parenting, the CC kids are getting these institutional skills that are very compatible, that are very valuable when it comes to the kids doing well in those environments. So, basically to do well in school, to do well at work, you need organization skills. You need to know how to manage your time and do it wisely. You need to be a good team player. Kind of the farther up you get in all institutions, more often you find yourself working with others, on a team or you're looking over a team. So you need to be a good team player. You need to be you need to be comfortable around authority figures because you're always kind of interacting with people kind of higher than you. And you don't want to be intimidated. You want to be able to kind of climb the rankings. And you want to be comfortable around non-family members because typically you're not going to be able to depend upon your family because they're not around you. So you're going to be kind of relying on other people. So you want to have kind of a comfort level around acquaintances, around strangers, because those are the people you're going to be working with to thrive within those spaces. So now going back to the NG skills. So, going back to, being on these formalized environments, always kind of working with other people, whether it be on a musical project, you need to know what kind of your part in relation to other people's parts. On a sport team, your part in relation to the other players. You build teamwork skills. You learn how to work well with others. But when you're in more informal types of play, you don't get those team skills, but you do learn autonomy. You do learn how to be independent. Again, like the creativity skills, when you don't have somebody telling you what to do, you have to figure it out on your own. So you build autonomy, you build independence. And so here again, both skills are skills you would like to have, or you would like your kid to have, to be a good team player, but also to be independent. But of the two skills, one is worth more when it comes to succeeding at school, succeeding at work. It's the teamwork skills. So again, if both skills were the same amount of worth, had the same value, then nobody would have an advantage over the other kid. But because the CC kids' skills are worth more, then they're having a head start. They have an advantage over the NG kids. And so that's what the thesis starts to get into. These CC kids are acquiring all these institutional skills that are very compatible with what the teacher asks of you. The teacher is asking you to simply be organized, manage your time wisely, and do the assignments. What your boss is asking of you. Work on a team, and through the teamwork, get the project done. And so those skills become more valuable in schools and at work compared to creativity skills, compared to being an independent individual. So, with that said, the NG skills, Laurel argues, are more compatible with kind of working in lower class environments. So, being a good team player is not going to help you navigate poverty, or navigate crime. But being creative, knowing how to do more with less, that can help you navigate poverty. Get by with less resources. Being independent, again, if you can't pay people to help you do it or do it for you, then you need to be able to figure it out on your own. And that's where you start to see where independence may not be very valuable in schools or at work, but independence is very valuable in terms of surviving, working in lower class environments. So you get institutional skills for the CC kid, and you get survival skills for the NG kid. And again, both help them kind of navigate their lives, but the different skill sets allow the CC kids to kind of thrive within school, thrive within work, and having the more survival skills. The NG kids typically just want to survive in those environments. They just want to get by, grade to grade, class to class, get their degrees and kind of go on. And just by getting by, and just by, getting by and not thriving, again, the CC kids are going to be at the top of the list when it comes to the graduate schools, when it comes to the high paying jobs. And then kind of below them, sometimes the NG kids have to settle for other jobs that are more working class, lower class job oriented. So that's kind of, what we're looking at there. And, as I mentioned in the lecture, the parents, always have the best intention for their kids. The parents just want to do what's best for their kids, but sometimes they define what is best differently. So, if you're growing up in poverty in an area where you have, relatively speaking, higher crime rate, maybe you're not going to worry about your kid, having the good time management skills. But if you don't have to worry about poverty, you don't have to worry about crime, and you know that in the long run, your kid being good at managing her time will help her succeed in college, then you can focus on that. So again, there are reasons for parents doing what they think is best for their kids. And LaRoe's not trying to say one style is better than the other, but she is saying they are different styles and they can contribute to class reproduction as a whole. So there, I'll leave that there for now. And I'll turn back over to you guys. Do you have any thoughts or questions so far?
Yeah, I have a question. So like depending on how the parents do that, like that would set like how their social like rankings are like in society.
Yeah, so basically, the CEC family, they have more, class in terms of they have more income and they have more what we call assets. So if you go back to the first lecture that we did, I kind of define class. Basically, it's how much money you're making, and assets represents, how much you own, whether it be stocks or the cars you own or jewelry. And you add those categories together, you get a class position. So you'd say kind of the NG families who are lower in class are not making as much money, and they don't have as many assets. And then, kind of set up, I always like to use the analogy. It's like playing cards where, your class position kind of is the hand you're dealt. So if you're dealt, if you're a working class family, you're going to have more, eights, fives, and sevens, and maybe a jack every now and again. You can play your cards any way you want, but it's going to be tough to kind of get ahead. And because the CC family with more resources, they're going to be dealt more tens, more jacks, more kings. So maybe you can win a hand or two, but long term, the stronger hands are always going to win, no matter how you play your cards. So that's how you kind of see what's going on here. The families are dealt a certain hand, and they play their hand to the best of their ability, given the hand that they're dealt. So it kind of goes back to the beginning of the semester when we talked about kind of the structural forces such as class, but also we do have free will, we do have agency to kind of live our lives, within those circumstances as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts or any other questions? All right, so I'll stop the recording part now. If you guys have any thing you want to discuss, I'll hang out and do that with you. Just one second.